My name is Michael Best, and I'm on the faculty at the Georgia Institute of Technology, Georgia Tech in Atlanta. And my work is in computing and international development, and I'll be moderating this panel. We have more panelists and organizers than we have other people in the room, so I think we should be very purposeful in trying to keep the formal remarks short. I'll keep it to 10 minutes because we might as well just have a discussion. It's such a small group, we could even just all sit off the dais and chat. It might be more fruitful than all the formalities of 10 cards and a speaker's panel table. But I will do introductions because it is a very distinguished set of speakers. The first speaker will be Mamadou, who is Director of École Supérieure Polytechnique in Dakar, Senegal, and he will discuss access from a Senegalese perspective, I believe. And I believe thinking about access more broadly than just infrastructural access, but cognitive access, human capacity access, I mean, going off of your abstracts. We then have Jamie Alexandre, who is a software architect lead at the Foundation for Learning Equality, who maybe we'll be talking about KA Lite, Khan Academy Lite, which is a version of Khan Academy, which I think we'll learn works in offline or in fault-tolerant or low-bandwidth networks. And finally, we'll hear from Mpine, Makoe. You know, I'm not the first to struggle pronouncing your name. I may not be the last, so apologies, but thanks for helping us with your name pronunciation. Who is head of the Institute for Open Distance Learning at the University of South Africa, which is a 15-city, you have 15 campuses across South Africa, perhaps? Roughly? Okay, a very large number of campuses and a huge student body, and we'll hear about how distance learning is part of programming at University of South Africa. So my understanding is Mamadou would like to go first, so please, to you Mamadou, and as I say, I will keep to the 10-minute time.
Okay, thank you. Can I say good morning?
You may say good morning.
The introduction of the MOOCs and the École Supérieure Polytechnique of Invitational. The MOOCs were adopted in the École Supérieure Polytechnique of Dakar with the help of RECIF. What's RECIF? RECIF is Réseau d'Excellence des Sciences de l'Ingénieur de la Francophonie, Francophone Network of Excellence in Engineering Science. RECIF. The RECIF was put in place during the 13th Summit of Heads of State and Government of the Francophonie held in Montreal, in Switzerland, on October 2010. The École Fédérale Politique Fédérale of the Land and the Department of Foreign Affairs took the initiative for the network, and Professor Patrick Adisher presented the project to the heads of state. RECIF is made of a total of 14 universities from Africa, North America, Asia, Europe, and the Middle East. It aims at promoting technological innovation for emerging countries through a partnership between universities from the north and the university from the south. The RECIF partners from the north, we have École Polytechnique Montréal, Canada. We have Institut National Polytechnique Grenoble, France. We have also Institut des Sciences Technologiques Paris Tech, École Normale Supérieure Lyon, France. There was Université Catholique Louvain-la-Neuve, Belgium, and École Polytechnique Fédérale Lausanne, Switzerland. Partners from the south, we have École Mohamedia d'Ingénieurs, Morocco, École Supérieure Polytechnique Sénégal, École Nationale Supérieure Polytechnique Yaoundé, Cameroon. We have also Institut International d'Ingénierie en Eau and Environnement, Burkina Faso, Institut Polytechnique Ho Chi Minh Ville, Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, We have St. Joseph University of Beirut, Liban. We have two universities, Haiti State University in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and another university, SPI University in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. 14 institutes. MOOCs and the RECIF. RECIF was launched in Lausanne by the president of the 14th University in April 2011. During the last 5 meetings, from November 2012 to February 2014, that were held by the heads of project of the RECIF, the focus was put on presenting the MOOC and on setting up an action plan to deploy it in the member institute of the RECIF. In Louvain-la-Neuve, in Belgium, in November 2012, an information session and the establishment of the roadmap for the year 2013 took place. In Yaoundé, in March 2013, action were proposed on how to set up the MOOCs within the network. To obtain the formal approval from the president of the university to expand the mission of the network to educational innovation through the information and communication technologies in the field of education and collaboration for the development of the MOOCs. The second point, to form an editorial committee to manage and develop the MOOCs under the RECIF. 2 editorial paths were proposed during the meeting: courses addressing the needs of the South in basic teaching in mathematics, physics, and computer science. The second, courses based on the themes for the RECIF, especially the ones involving research such as the ones on water and energy. In Montreal in June 2013, after noticing the first impacts of the first MOOCs diffused by the École Polytechnique Fédérale, specific actions were then planned. The conditions under which the École Polytechnique Fédérale of Lausanne founded the project were clarified. The funding of the MOOCs courses should include the production and the delivery of the course, the training of the professors, and the establishment of infrastructure to facilitate diffusion. The second point, the use of the MOOCs as a source of massive spread of higher education would respond to the rapid problem of rising numbers among university students. The professors from the South, preferably the ones with senior status, should be trained in the creation and diffusion of MOOCs in order to make them ambassadors and instructors of the local professor. Frequent exchange and follow-up meetings between professors from the North and the South would be required during the training of the professor and the drafting of the RECIF cooperative courses. In Ho Chi Minh, the strategy was defined in regard to the founding option, in regard to the current method of funding, the ongoing funding system, the funding of the project, and strategies for long-term and short-term funding with 3 main objectives. 1, to develop the works of research and educational projects under the university. Second, the funding for activities such as a platform for agencies, networking projects, scholarship, and training programs for application to all members of the RECIF, as well as activities allowing the new project. 3, exchange between students and researchers. And I want to present you the MOOCs at the ASP, Cultural Polytechnic. The first point is instructor training. The École Polytechnique Fédérale of Lausanne had invited 3 professors and the head of the Open e-learning training cell to a 2 weeks training seminar as part of the RECIF initiative during the month of August and September 2013. Second, better access to internet. The campus and dorms are now better done with internet. The connection terminals allow the students to have access to the online classes. However, in order to meet the standards of the books, the bandwidth should be increased. We create also a study committee on the MOOCs, strategic planning of the project within the MOOCs, and the monitoring and evaluation of the strategic plan for the MOOCs, the supervision of the realization and diffusion of the MOOCs, and the last, verification of procedures in meeting the norm of orientation. The last point is a technical unit for coordination to produce MOOCs. The technical branch of the study committees is supported by the head of the research resources center for the digital world environment. Launching of the MOOCs. In February, the MOOCs were launched in the grand room for Unité Africaine of the International Foreign Center, Trade Center of Senegal, also known as Foire de Dakar. Both the École Supérieure Politique Dakar and the École Politique Fédérale of Lausanne took initiative in the launching. They received a massive participation from universities, institutes, and schools, both public and private. This is the announcement of the launching. École Supérieure Politique Dakar, École Politique Fédérale de Lausanne, cérémonie de lancement du MOOCs. Massive open online classes in France, clubs, cours en ligne ouvert et massif. MOOCs, how to follow gratuitement, free courses of the prestigious university and school in America, in Canada, and in Europe. The last six-fold implementation of the MOOCs will help attain the objective set by the plan Senegal Emergent. Is a new plan from the Senegal, and by offering education to a higher number of students under better conditions, with access at low cost to the coursework, and prepared by the most prestigious university and school from the United States, Canada, and Europe. You are invited to take part of the 50 years anniversary of the École Supérieure Politique in Dakar during the month of May, between 24 and 28 May this year. I have finished, and I want to thank you for your attention. And excuse me about my English, which is not good.
It was good. It was great.
Good morning. Oh, it's just showing there. Okay. Okay, I'm just gonna, maybe a lot of it have been said, and I've been changing this slides several times because the infrastructural constraints have been talked about quite a bit. So I thought maybe I should just talk about how we could use the mobile phone to overcome infrastructural constraints. But first I need to introduce you where I'm coming from. I'm from the University of South Africa. The University of South Africa is one of those oldest universities that have been around for over 140 years. And I think it's the oldest distance education institution in the world. And over the years, it has changed from being an examining body, from correspondence to distance education, to open distance learning, and now we're going the online route. And we have a student body of 400,000 students. 90% of them are from South Africa, and they're scattered all over. We have regional centers in South Africa and also in Ethiopia. We have 10% of our students come from 130 countries, scattered all over the world. So it's a massive institution. We are located on top of the hill in Pretoria. So when you drive into Pretoria, that's the first huge building that you come across, that you see, and it's on the hill. And it's a beautiful building. It's overlooking the whole city. We have 5,000 staff members, and more than half are administrative, and that's the nature of distance education. Many people are doing more administrative work than teaching and learning. And we have illustrious alumni. Nelson Mandela is one of our alumni, and many people. And as a distance education institution, has given a chance to many people who otherwise wouldn't have access to higher education. So that's basically the context. Then I work for the Institute for Open Distance Learning, where we do research in distance education and basically doing reflective research in the area, in this space that we're working in. And we're also engaged in a lot of associations in Africa, distance education associations in Africa and also in the region. So distance education basically is based on 3 principles. It's flexibility, access, and student-centeredness. So those are the 3 characteristics or 3 principles that guides open distance learning. And in Africa in general and in South Africa in particular, there are triple challenges of education in almost all developing countries. One is of expanding access, improving quality of education, and ensuring equity. However, these challenges are on the backdrop of the lack of infrastructure that everybody has been talking about here. Poor roads, postal services, electricity, telephone networks, all those things. Digital fluency is the second challenge that we have. There are fewer people who have expertise of using computers. And the other thing also, using computers for teaching and learning. Because many people can use all these technologies that we have. However, for teaching and learning, it's another story altogether. And in distance education, one of our major challenges in distance education is the interaction between students and the lecturer, the student and their peers, and the student and the institution. Because the nature of distance education is such that students are separated from their lecturers, from their teachers. So it's a different way of learning. So then we are challenged if we have to have students who is located in the remotest place in South Africa, with how do we support that kind of a student. So, and then the big confusion these days, it's all these terms. There are so many terms, and most often, more often than not, they are all being said under the same breath. Basically, you know, you have e-learning, online learning, open educational resources, and one of the projects that I'm working on for the International Council for Distance Education is trying to define all these terms, and all of us from different parts of the world that are trying to define the terms, we come up with a whole lot of different ways of defining all these terms. So the definition also it's not very clear, and I don't know whether we do need a clear definition or we just need something to work with. Now, in terms of the whole technology, I picked up the statistics from Statistics South Africa 2012, and they're talking about the access of technology. Almost 98% of people have access to cell phones. Landline is very low, computers equally. Internet access is quite low, and most of those who have internet access, they do access it through mobile phone. A lot of people have radios and television. The potential for using cell phones, given this, is that a majority of people do have access to cell phones. And I'll just go down to, and it's more accessible to most rural communities in terms of cost, geographic coverage, and ease to use. And many people now are browsing the internet from their cell phones. So, and also it encourages people to learn together according to Anderson, while retaining individual control over the time, space, presence, activity, identity, and relationship. So M-learning basically it offers us the informal, flexible, portable, mobile, and interactive way of learning. It supports collaborative, situated, informal, and lifelong learning. Now, I'm just saying, I'm talking about how we can use it in teaching and learning. It can be used, especially in distance education, for interaction opportunities, where people can call each other, where people can use social networks that are on mobile phones, Facebook, Mixit in South Africa. Mixit is very popular. It can reach large audiences, and because most students and people have access to cell phones, it does get, it's easier for many people to use, and it's cost effective if you go on to using all, although it's expensive, but it's also cheaper to use if you use these social networks that are available. And also it can support and encourage learners in a variety of ways. And a quotation by Desmond Keegan says, it's not technologies with inherent pedagogical qualities that are successful in distance education, but technologies that are generally available to citizens. And this couldn't be further from the truth, because if people have something in their disposal, that they are more likely to use it much better. And just to go back to the MOOCs story, there are a lot of initiatives that are taking place within the continent that I'm aware of. Through the African Council for Distance Education, the Open University of Tanzania is presently developing a MOOC on digital literacy. Open Ed also is also assisting us with the widening impact. Open Ed, their approach to MOOC is that it has to be a widening participation, and there should be diverse systems of MOOCs. And it should be OER based, more than licensed and be in a certain thing. And Open Ed comes from the open education movement. And therefore, they look at MOOCs as a classroom online. It's not necessarily an open, flexible student center that we mentioned about. And then also we have the OERU education. So basically all these initiatives are trying to come up with the concept of us being consumers, not producers of knowledge. Now at UNISA, we have been debating this term to MOOC or not to MOOC for a very long time. And then we finally said, we had several meetings about MOOCing or not MOOCing. And when we finally decided to say, well, if we have to MOOC, it must be context specific, it must address our concerns about student support, because those are the biggest concerns that we have as a distance education. It must address issues of access to technology. It must be accessible anywhere, anytime, and any place. And it shouldn't be restricted to maybe a classroom. It shouldn't be restricted to a set of time or whatever. It must be a distance education MOOC. I don't know whether it will be a MOOC by the time we're finished with it, but we are trying to do this. And also, it must be sustainable, and quality is also key. Now, before we can say to MOOC or not to MOOC, we have to have a MOOC in order for us to test those things that you're talking about. And now we are in the process of developing an English writing course. However, the way we are going to develop it, we are not developing it as a standalone MOOC where you can walk in and participate in it. We are developing it as a support intervention for an already existing course that is there. There are certain areas in this course that the lecturer has identified as problem areas. So she wants to develop that intervention strategy as sort of a classroom where students can have access to her at a given time and support them as they go along. And that support can be done through cell phones, and internet has to be accessed through cell phones. So the aim here is to analyze learner practices and gather research data and see if this type of a MOOC, it may not be a type of a MOOC as defined as it is, but we are looking at a MOOC that is meant to support students in a distance education environment. Yeah, thank you very much.
Excellent.
Okay.
I actually didn't see the thank you slide coming right then. I was wondering what would be coming up next. So perfect timing. And now for our final presentation.
It was rushed. Oh, okay.
All right. Well, it's great to be here amongst very like-minded people. It's been very exciting at this conference to see people thinking in the same way about these things, and I'm just very happy to be part of this community. So we've been talking a lot about MOOCs, and MOOCs in the last few years, there's been this hype bubble with everybody talking about it as a revolution. It's changing everything. So the question is, what is it changing? What is it about this that makes us consider it to be some sort of revolution? So there are a couple of pedagogical innovations that these types of systems support. One is, say, flipping the classroom, where people can be watching videos, take the lecture outside of the classroom, and use the classroom time for more engaged interactive activities and have direct teacher-student and student-student involvement. Another cool property of using these systems is mastery-based learning or self-paced learning, where people can work through materials at their own pace, they can go in the directions that interest them. We don't leave students behind, and we don't have to hold students back if they're wanting to explore something and they're ready for it. But I think the thing that's most exciting for me and for what I've been hearing many of the people here is the possibility of reaching more and more people and equalizing, leveling the playing field, and enabling access for more people. And this is embodied in the mission statements of a lot of these online education providers. Anyone, anywhere, anyone around the world, anyone, anywhere, anytime. And so it's this ubiquity that I think is a big part of this revolution. And this is the potential that we've been talking about here at this conference, but doesn't mean that it's being realized. One thing that all of this depends on is this, what we call a global network that's connecting us all together, so the internet. But with 2/3 of the world not having access to the internet at all, not being internet users at all, and a large portion of those who do have internet access using expensive connections, low bandwidth connections, or intermittent connections, it's very difficult for most of the world to take advantage of these resources that are being made available and participating in this global community. And this is exacerbated by the fact that it's particularly the lowest income countries, as you would expect, that have the least access to internet access. And of course, these are the same countries that have the highest student-to-teacher ratios, and the fewest books, the fewest materials, the least amount of overall educational infrastructure supporting education. And so what we see is we end up with this sort of feeding into this cycle where, like we've been talking about a lot at this conference, those who are already the most disadvantaged are being left further behind because we're specifically enabling access for those who are in the upper, more elite tiers. And so if we don't break this cycle, I mean, we've heard talk of maybe in 20 years, everybody will be at the same levels of internet access that we see here. But if we're leaving that generation behind in the meantime, those multiple generations behind in the meantime, then there's going to be something else for them to catch up with by the time the internet does come, like in higher bandwidth for them. And so if we don't proactively try and find solutions for what we're working with now, then we're just leaving people behind and we're perpetuating this cycle of poverty and lack of education. But the situation, there are ways that we can work around some of these infrastructural constraints. In most countries, there's some areas that might have some higher bandwidth connections. And so we can get content and materials into those areas over the higher bandwidth connections, and then sync them out over lower bandwidth connections, whether it's 3G or dial-up, to areas that are more remote and have less infrastructure. And then we can leverage human networks and transportation networks to get the content that last mile, because in many cases, it's really that last mile going from somewhere that has some sort of connectivity to a more rural area. That's the real problem. And so if we leverage SneakerNet, we can carry in content and software to places that are completely off the grid. And so I think there are two parallel revolutions. We've seen the revolution of vastly increasing broadband internet in the developed world that's enabled in many ways the MOOC revolution and led to it. But at the same time, we have these parallel revolutions of low-cost computing where the hardware itself is decreasing in cost much faster than the bandwidth. So this is a Raspberry Pi, which is a $25 computer, which we can use as a server for serving educational software locally. And the tablets shown around the outside are these Akash Tablets, which are coming down in price to about $30 and being used a lot in India. And we've seen Android devices, like we've heard, like mobile devices are exploding, and cheaper smartphones and tablets are exploding. This is the plot of Android devices in the last 8 years, I think, just exploding, and the large portion of that is through the developing world. The other revolution that we're seeing is OERs, the release of more and more content under these open licenses. And this is a prerequisite for this sort of distribution, this sort of free-form distribution. Because if we don't have these open licenses, we need to get explicit permission to do any sort of distribution. And that doesn't scale when you're trying to take stuff offline because you don't have the communication channels. And so what we did was take Khan Academy, this online platform of over 4,000 videos and 400 exercises in a wide range of topics, along with a software platform we developed to track progress, enable coach reports, and turned it into this offline platform called K-Lite, which involved taking the software and adapting it such that it could be run on low-power devices like this cheap Raspberry Pi. And then the model is you can install it locally. So you're taking the server, which traditionally would be in the cloud, and you have to connect over a higher bandwidth connection, and make it local, so that all the connections are local and high speed, but you're not having the expense of external bandwidth. Or you can run it directly on a computer or tablet to have the content completely local. And then the teacher can then also connect in and view the data, how the students are interacting, so they can be an active part of this process, figure out which students are struggling the most, and intervene, sit down with them, and enable this sort of engaged classroom environment. And in many cases, as we know, electricity is even scarce, and so these hardware devices are low power enough that in many cases they can be run off of solar, and so we can find other ways to get around those infrastructural constraints. As we've talked about a lot, language barriers. This is, again, it's an initial solution because we don't see this as the final solution to supporting learning in local languages is translation. And we'll talk later about other solutions that we're looking at beyond that. But the Khan Academy content has been translated into many languages. And it's also, the interface for K-Lite is now being translated as well. So we launched in December of 2012 this open source software platform, and it exploded. It would soon involve, we've been installed in countries all over the world. It's now been installed in over 85 countries. And most of this is grassroots, people just taking it, installing it, downloading the content, taking it somewhere and setting it up. And so I think that's the power of open content and open source software, is people can take it, use it for their own needs. It doesn't involve this sort of intervention. It's people adapting it for their own needs. In many different contexts: schools, homes, orphanages, boats, vans, community centers, prisons, and even at universities. And I think that last one is an interesting case. The University of Cape Town, which we heard about yesterday, has very limited bandwidth, such that each student only has 3 gigabytes of bandwidth to use per month, external bandwidth. And so they set up a local instance of K-Lite within the university network, and so the students could access these materials without using up their quota. An interesting case study at an orphanage in Cameroon, a group took this and installed donated laptops for a local computer lab with K-Lite on it. It originally intended for the kids, and the older kids were mentoring the younger kids and talking them through it. But then it turned into a community classroom where teachers and other community members and adults came and learned alongside the kids. So it became this sort of community learning hub, which I think is a really exciting concept. These pictures we just got yesterday, I think, a pilot that happened in Liberia by a group from Taylor University, where after 3 days using K-Lite, 8 hours using the software, the first time for many of these kids using computers at all, they saw a 29% improvement between the pre-test and the post-test in their math scores. This is one of our larger projects that we're coordinating more closely with in India, where they're using a single Raspberry Pi server and 35 Akash Tablets for a classroom to have a low-cost blended learning environment where the teachers can be going around engaging with students as they're doing exercises and watching videos, and the teacher can view the coach reports and intervene to help the students. And we're scaling up to do a randomized controlled trial starting in June. So, like we were talking about earlier, and like we've talked about so many times at this conference, this is kind of the model that we have right now, where we have this sort of central, more elite content producer that's created this content, and maybe it's being translated to make it a bit more accessible, but then it's just this distribution model where that content is going out and ending up in these places, and hopefully it's useful. But the model we really want to work towards is one like we've been talking about, where it's participatory and inclusive. Everybody is creating content and sharing content in a peer-to-peer distributed fashion, so that everybody can participate and contribute and create content that's relevant for their local contexts. And so my 3 conclusions / exhortations are that we can't just wait 20 years. We can't just focus on getting the bandwidth in there, because it's going to take that amount of time realistically. We need to proactively design around the current constraints. We need to encourage the use of these open licenses that allows offline distribution and easy distribution. And that these tools need to empower the local communities rather than just being a central distribution mechanism, so there can be local content creation and participatory learning community. And so the nonprofit that we founded to help support this work, the Foundation for Learning Equality, is continuing to develop and wanting to help support these sorts of initiatives. And yeah, very excited to be part of this community.
Okay, thank you very much. Nicely on time as well. So we're talking about infrastructural constraints, but I sort of foreshadowed a guess that we'd hear about infrastructure broadly conceived. And I think we did some aspects of cultural infrastructures, cognitive infrastructures, power infrastructures, a lot about institutional infrastructures. I was struck both from a 4-year-old consortium to a 140-year-old university, a lot about the power of your institutions as they relate to either contemplating MOOCs or editing and curating MOOCs. So I'm going to ask the first question, if you allow me. I'd love to talk more about institutional infrastructures, but that's not the question I'm going to ask, because generally when we think about infrastructure, we do think about the technical infrastructures. And so what I'm really wondering is kind of pinging off of all three of your presentations, the notion of the mobile network and the mobile appliance, which are two different infrastructures that are deeply intertwined. Mamadou, you mentioned that the internet is dotted across your campus, which of course is a wonderful word, you know, dotted, suggesting that it's only in occasional places on your campus do you have internet infrastructure present. Yet I know across generally all of metropolitan Dakar, the mobile network is reasonably pervasive, though not always provisioned to support strong data. But I nevertheless am curious how you think about how you might move from your dotted internet infrastructure to the mobile network on the Dakar campus, and how you might think about something like when Jamie says the UCT is sad about their low levels of bandwidth. In point of fact, that would be wonderful compared to, I think, ESP in Dakar. So how you sort of think about the differentiation between dotted to pervasive mobile to UCT to even hear what we have a pen. I know it's ask me if I should repeat, and the question if it's unclear. And then related to both of you, I think, Mpine, you spoke to the benefits of the mobile appliance, not just the network, but the appliance. But what I didn't hear from you is any of the downfalls of the appliance. To what extent is the form factor impoverished? Is the form factor pedagogically difficult? In what cases does that interrogate the quote you gave, which is that it doesn't matter about the appliance, it's all about the pervasiveness? You know, you said there's no good pedagogical technology, it's what you have is what matters. But can you turn that around? And then, Jamie, connecting to that, you're talking about Raspberry Pis, but not about feature-rich phones. Can you turn it around, because you're mostly deploying onto laptops or Raspberry Pis where you might have larger form factors? Is that because you think the handset is pedagogically impaired? If so, what would you do to turn that around? If not, why not, et cetera, et cetera. So, hope it's not too confusing. And anyone can go on any of that.
I'll try to answer to your question. We have our problem is bandwidth. So when our students download video, they have a big problem because it's a bit slow. So we create a server, and once you download a video, you will have this video in the server, and student can download faster than if it's from Lausanne. And we have all the servers around this one. He is the principal. So when one student download video courses, so it's done only one time, it's finished. So they have the impression that it's very fast for them, but it's not very fast. So our problem is to, because if you want to work with MOOCs, you have interactive actions. So we need to get more, to have a bandwidth more large, more
bandwidth.
Yeah, more good.
bandwidth. But we have another problem is to develop MOOCs. We have no experience now, and it's why we are working with Lausanne, and we have team. In the team you can find professor from Dakar and professor in Lausanne. So they work together, and our professor will get experience before we develop our own courses. I don't know if I have.
Yeah, and what do your students in Dakar, do they use their mobile phones with any social media platforms, a Mixit or a Facebook, or
Yes.
what are they doing on their mobile
Yes.
phones?
In ESP, each student have a laptop.
Oh,
So every student, each student have a laptop. So we have not a problem of connection for our student to the server. No problem. They have, all the students have a mobile phone also. They have also a laptop. So it's not very difficult for us, for them to connect.
Oh, you want me to respond? In distance education, the nature of distance education, in the environment of distance education, we've used different technologies at the same time to support our students. And the bottom line is about supporting our students. And you heard me talking about how we should use mobile technologies. We are introducing mobile technologies into the whole support structures. And when we think about the history of distance education, or not even the history, almost every other institution that started distance education, they used a certain type of technology. Right from when the stamps were introduced, that's when correspondence started. And then when Open University started, it used television. And television, I mean, you don't have to register for a course. Your friend, your family can watch it. That's the original MOOC. They just didn't call it a MOOC. We have study material that are distributed all over the place, and that we don't even know what happens to those study material once they leave our hands. So what we're saying with this particular technology, mobile technology, is that we can use it to support the lack of communication that is not there, the lack of interaction that is not there. And probably I didn't raise the issue of the pedagogy, the importance of interaction, social interaction as a pedagogy for teaching and learning, because it's something that we don't talk about more often. More often than not, when we talk about MOOCs or when we talk about courses, we talk about content. We don't talk about the interaction. But in distance education, we are very much alert to the fact that students need in some kind of interaction. And when we have these kinds of technologies, the new technologies that are coming in, they are there to support that kind of a thing. If someone is in the middle of the rural area, stuck somewhere, you can be able to communicate with them, and they can communicate with their teachers, their friends through social networks. That is why, hence, our development of study material must encourage that kind of communication in order for us to pay students. One of our biggest issues in distance education, people drop out, and they drop out because the pacing is not there. You know, and it's exactly with MOOCs. I look at MOOCs and I look at distance education. The dropout is because there's no pacing. And that itself is problematic. So how do we do that? How do we sort of encourage someone to say, you know, we are here and we can hear you. And we're using the technology that they already have at their disposal, that they're using on regular basis for social interaction. And I'm not saying that cell phones should be used on their own. They should be used to support, as a support tool.
So mobile phones more as interactivity than content delivery.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Wonderful. I'd like to echo everything that's said here. I'm really excited about what you said, Mamadou, with the local copy of the video, so it's only downloaded once. That's very much the same sort of model that K-Lite uses, where in many cases there's enough connectivity to download once, but then after that you don't want to be re-downloading the same video again and again. So having that local copy, I think, is a perfect model. And in terms of the devices, the form factor for us wasn't a major factor. In some cases, resolution is important, especially with the Khan Academy videos. Some of the, if it's too low resolution, you can't read the text that's been written. But the major factor for us in choosing those devices as a recommended device is the cost. So whatever the lowest cost device is that can support the process, these tablets ended up being that low cost device. But again, yeah, it can be installed on any, I think the hardware is sort of incidental, so like you said, Mpine, it's exactly the, whatever people have, we want to be able to support that, as well as finding the lowest cost alternatives for people who don't yet have hardware. And I think the big thing really is, like we've been talking about, the bandwidth. Because my understanding is from talking to some groups in South Africa that in many cases, especially the rural areas along the Capes, that a single 3G connection for a few gigabytes may be over $100 per month, which is unaffordable for an individual in most cases. And in so many cases, there's a school that shares a single 3G connection, which is enough for maybe occasionally downloading 1 or 2 new videos, but can't be used for a number of students simultaneously streaming. And so taking advantage of that connection to download things maybe during the downtime when prices are cheaper at night, and then have students be able to engage with the content locally from the local server, I think is the perfect model with whatever devices.
Wonderful. I think, please. Yeah, thank you, Jamie, and the rest. It's very interesting. In fact, with Jamie's foundation, they were trying to partner in. I'm Makoe here from the World Bank and University of Virginia. The question I have for Jamie is how far has Akash in India mass-produced their no price point device? And secondly, do you think that in a country like where we are trying to partner in Nigeria, there could be a combination of bringing your own device of different kinds?
Yeah.
There are 174 million people in Nigeria. There are 150 million mobile phones, but there are only about maybe 10 million smartphones where you can get the internet. And so the possibility of that one is there, but your Raspberry Pi is enabling other devices, and bringing your own device in the situation there is possibly good, because in urban areas, especially in most of the world, these are ubiquitous, right?
Yeah, so perfect question, thank you, Marita. And it's, I think the Akash tablets still, there's a lot of room, a lot of potential. I think they're not produced at high enough quantities to support the vision, the initial vision. But they're actually just one device. They've been driving the price of others down, but there's a lot of competition in China now to produce sort of the cheapest tablet. And so there's a wide range of these tablets. We went with the Akash because it was easy for us to source and knew that there was some level of standard of quality. But there's huge competition that's driving the prices down lower and lower. And they're now selling these devices in the developed world as well as a low-end tablet.
What's the price point now?
I think $39 in the developed world. The subsidized Indian government one, they're getting down, I think, $25.
25.
But these prices, I mean, you can buy on Amazon, you can buy just like 10 different $50 tablets. And those prices are continually coming down. So I think, yeah, and again, this bringing any device. So basically, K-Lite is designed, anything that has a browser and has Wi-Fi could come to one of these local hotspots and connect and access the content, the local content. And we're also working on a version that can be installed locally on an Android device, so that the whole server can run there. And the eventual goal is that any device can talk to any other device and get new content, so it can then be taken home. So you can sync stuff up peer-to-peer to have broader distribution and enable the sneaker net in new ways.
So, Jamie, I love your model, and I really like, what I heard about using phones for the interactivity piece. But, going back to the presentation that was in the beginning about from Russell Field talking about how it should be focused on Learn Future or whatever, I think so, Future Learn whatever, is focusing on like responsive MOOCs. I mean, at the end, I'm trying to see how do we connect from there to here, because if I'm building a MOOC and if I have a MOOC platform, having responsive content is something, but I don't know how it goes from there to the feature phones. And I mean, I understand the model of the hotspot, but is there anything else in when we're designing these MOOCs that we can think of that makes it more appropriate to work over feature phones or things of that sort? I'd love to hear.
So
Any thoughts about it?
Feature phones, and I think you can speak to this as well.
Okay.
It's yeah.
And I think also when we develop something, I think from a teacher's perspective, we must not develop it with technology in mind. We must develop it with the teaching and learning in mind, and make it in such a way that it is accessible. Technology should drive the access part of it. It should be accessible to those people, rather than, and then I think we get bogged down in what technology can do for us, instead of what is it that we want to do technology to do for us.
And yeah, I think in terms of, I definitely agree with that it's not about the technology, but I think we do need to design for the technology that exists. And so, like we were talking about earlier, I think resolution of videos, so that not having something that's in a high resolution video and is so small that if it's rendered onto a smaller screen, it wouldn't be visible. I think that sort of design issue, like realizing the constraints of the existing hardware and maybe focusing in the videos that it's focused on the content being explained, would be one type of designing for the existing hardware. But in general, yeah, I think the idea is just focusing on creating content that's relevant for the populations, but also not just like we heard about designing for the future. If we're designing only for the future now, then we're leaving out people now, and so we need to make sure that it works with those constraints. But and responsive design is
and not just packaging our needs for the technology, but also designing the technology for our needs. And that's something, maybe it's my own hobby horse to some degree, but an issue that I'm always quite interested in. We see it a little bit in things like the Indian responses to the low-cost laptops, but how is it that, sort of North American, middle-aged white guys are sitting around designing for the rest of the planet and sometimes missing the mark a little bit? So in some ways, a question I always have is, what if we had perfect technology? What would it look like? What would it, and maybe for Senegal it would not look like the same for South Africa. And if not, then we should maybe make those two disparate pieces of technology, and what would they be?
Sorry, I just wanted to add to that point, and then I'm also working at the World Bank and ICT team, and then
Can you tell us your name?
Salary Imaisun, and some of our team is working more on the technology plus design thinking. So when we do implement some technological solutions, make sure to have like a design thinking approach, which is like a user-centric, rapid prototyping, so that the many iteration happens, and then user is the center of technology, and then not the technology. So technology is not just supplying, but the user will provide what they need, and then the technology needs to adapt adapt to that. Then I think the user-centric technology and service will be provided. And I think probably that point needs to be incorporated. And then some of the American universities, like the Stanford Design School, and then the many other schools, like started to build in this design thinking approach into the engineering and product development. So this movement also need to come into the application for technology as well.
So my name is Ryan Lippman-Quinn. I'm from the Botswana Mpine partnership, and I wish I was here for the beginning of this session. But I just wanted to add some, just based on the conversation I've heard about appropriate technology. I haven't heard anybody mention the use of like USSD for delivering any educational content. And I'd be curious from panelists and other people if anybody has any experience with that. From my own experience, I've been based in Botswana for the past few years. We've done a few projects delivering treatment guidelines over USSD. So someone enters a USSD session, they get navigated through a bunch of menu screens of the treatment guidelines, the algorithms there. And it doesn't offer, it doesn't support multimedia, but you can still offer educational resources over USSD, over those kind of just menus, guided menus, do little quizzes, stuff like that. So I'd be really curious to hear people's thoughts on how that might be utilized, because that's on every single mobile device in the world right now. So that's something that I feel like if people focused a lot of efforts on, you could reach a lot more people a lot more quickly with MOOCs.
We've been actually experimenting with the idea in the Tahrir Academy in
Can I
Egypt.
actually suggest, not everyone maybe knows what USSD is, and
Oh,
also
maybe
discuss SMS as sort of the thing.
Sure. So just a quick one. I'm going to talk about this in my global health talk later today too, briefly. But USSD is a different type of mobile technology. It's not voice, it's not SMS, but it's basically if anybody's used topped up airtime in a country where you do that, where you dial like *154* #, that's a USSD session that you're starting. And it's just a different kind of connection with a database. You connect directly with it. You can go. I think there's a 182 character limit on each screen, and you can have as long of a duration as you want. It's generally free for the user unless they charge you after you reach a certain screen. In South Africa, startups are using it to offer Google Maps directions on it, public transport information. Some people are letting people gamble on it, looking at sports scores and gambling, stuff like that. Mobile banking uses it all the time, but very few applications in health and education, unfortunately. So just kind of wanted to raise that to the group.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I was just saying it's a great idea, but it depends on the telecom operator, because in Egypt it's not the case. They charge the user and the organization, so it's very costly from that standpoint. I believe honestly the concept is great for medical education because you can disseminate small amounts of information that can actually reach for example, Egypt has the highest per capita rate of virus C. And which can be avoidable through very small and little means. So if we can share this kind of information, it would be great. But the telecom operators,
I think the biggest barriers are telecoms, and that's where public-private partnerships.
Unlike SMS or even voice or even normal data, USSD has to be insinuated into the operator's activities.
Yeah.
USSD or SMS and MOOCs from the panelists?
Well, at the university we use a lot of SMSs to communicate with the students because we have that huge number of students. We need to remind them about the assignments and all those kind of things. They work quite well, and we also have the discussion forums. And the discussion forums I think are even better, because then students can learn from each other to form their own study groups and learn from each other. And then that gives sort of a peer support. And that's why I was talking about cell phones in terms of that particular role that it plays, that pedagogical role that it plays, not necessarily on downloading. You can download stuff on the cell phone if you have a smartphone. You can, but also we need to recognize that other people don't have smartphones that you can easily download huge videos or certain things, and those have become very expensive to download. But then we are looking at also a cell phone that is easy for many people to utilize. And in a study that I conducted with students, actually students were saying that, and many of them had smartphones, by the way. You know, I was pleasantly surprised, including those that live in the most remote places, they had smartphones. And then also those who don't have, they were willing to pay more money for it. So people are willing to pay more money to get the education or to get something that will assist them to get what they want.
And so yeah, I haven't used USSD in any of my my work, but I think that along with SMS are very exciting in terms of what we've talked about here as taking advantage of multiple technologies to create learning environments. One of the difficulties with K-Lite is that yes, you have all the content, you have the interactivity, you have progress tracking and coach reports locally, but it's not necessarily linked up with other learning communities, and so for more isolated communities that want to engage, that's a challenge. And so I think this could go nicely. Like, so our focus mostly has been create the local learning environments. You have local peer interaction. But these sorts of technologies can enable alongside, so I'm engaging with this content, maybe there's some sort of code in the content. I can now type in a code that sends me into a joint discussion session with
That's
others in
kind
other
of
areas.
what I envisioned is, you know, when the people don't have access to the environment where they have access to computer, internet, whatever, when they're at home, they can still do a quick quiz or, you know, look at some summaries of modules.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
and so I think there could be some clever combinations of
Yeah.
those technologies, and that's exciting.
Oh, sorry.
This is a little off topic, but related. So in the United States, when we look at especially technology in classrooms, there's always a large discussion around protection of children, what content they're getting, how they're seeing it, and who they're being exposed to in this wider connection. And I'm just wondering how we discuss that, because here we are trying to promote the connection of people that are remote to other people. But then how do we do, especially when there are children involved, how do we do the protection part of that as well?
Protection has always been an issue, and I remember when I was doing my study on MOOCs4D, it's a social network that is very popular amongst young people and whatever. The issue, the biggest issue was the issue of protection. But the other thing also, we need to, I always say that we need to teach children about these things. As much as we want them to have access, we need to teach them how to not to talk to strangers, the same way as we teach them not to talk to strangers physically. We need to do that, because we cannot stop certain things from happening, because what we found also in South Africa is that the more you say you remove all these technologies and you hide them, the more they're going to get them. So it's better for us to be open about these things. And these days we don't, in the beginning there was a lot of conversations around protection. But now it's all sort of phased out, because then people are beginning to learn how to use these things. And also we need to teach our children how to protect themselves.
So one thing I've been struck by is we keep talking about, on the phone side at least, we keep talking about smartphones, but of course there's this rapid deployment of feature-rich phones, whatever that means. And definitely when we're thinking about the African continent, even if we think about Nigeria, and the numbers are fuzzy, but there could be 50 million phones that are capable of data and browsing and social media. And so what is good enough? What is good enough for K-Lite or for the interactivity that you want to supplement the content delivery? When do you know you have enough? Or do you always want more?
We always want more. Obviously, we always want more. But maybe if we design for that one that you're talking about, that is in South Africa, it's about 500 rands, where people can take pictures, they can download the internet, they can, the very basic things that they can do, but not too basic that it doesn't have all those other facilities.
Yeah, in the context of what Jamie and us are planning in Nigeria, it is really to test whether K-Lite will work in an environment in the localities and looking at the videos of Khan Academy that can be, can be seen, because, and remember, Sal Khan writes small things there. And if you are in a smartphone and it's too small for you, then it doesn't make sense, right? However, that's the reason for the, the testing of it. But beyond that, the pedagogy has to be understood, because what's the impact of the learning the the basic math on math learning in the situation? That's why we're talking about a randomized experiment in the state of Ekiti in Nigeria to match the work in India, to understand how it is on the ground when the rubber meets the road, right? Whether in fact they are able to read, to see the video or not, and if they're able to see the video, whether they're learning from it, is the proof of whether this technology's work really is in whether English or math or science is improving from the baseline to to the next line.
We're really kind of running out of time, but I'm wondering if there's any burning last minute.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe it's a little bit late to discuss this, and I don't know if you guys already discussed this topic. I believe the constraints are not only with for the learners, for the maybe disseminate the content to the learners, but also on the content creation part. For example, we depend a lot on crowdsourcing. That's our model. So we always target expats that live outside of Egypt to create the content. And I believe this will be the case for a lot of developing countries who want to reach out for those who receive better education and maybe in parts of the world like North America, UK, Europe, what have you. So this is again a digital constraint. It could be not only digital, but it's definitely a constraint. So I was wondering, it could be a topic for another session, I don't know, but I was wondering if I want to know your insights about this and the possible solutions for it. Because getting an expat to create a video, sometimes we have to wait for 6 months until this expat comes to Cairo to do the shooting and the filming and so forth.
So I think one thing along those lines, it can be dangerous, and we talked about this even at my home university, University of California, San Diego, where if you focus on these videos need to be super high production quality, need to have really good, perfect lighting, need to have, I mean, there are certain prerequisites like audible, like clear audio, and be able to see clearly sort of what's going on. But beyond that, it can be almost dangerous in promoting the need for this high production standard, because it can limit the people who are able to contribute. One model we've looked at is having people be able to write on a tablet with a stylus and have that recorded in this Alcon style video, and recorded in a low bandwidth fashion as well, just as the strokes, a sequence of strokes that can be replayed in the browser, rather than this higher bandwidth video to make it easier to sync. And maybe using the camera, which you can record directly into the browser, recording little, so sitting it somewhere, having a nice video, like videos that document the process of how to do this, maybe looking at a blackboard if somebody prefers writing there, or showing physical objects depending on what they're teaching. It may be relevant to just show visually what they're doing, and just record little chunks of video that they can just drag and drop into a sequence and make a simple lesson. And so I think leveraging lower cost hardware for creating and changing the way we think about the standards for production quality will, as long like focusing on pedagogy and like audibility and these basic features, but not on making it like TV, could allow more people to engage in the creation process.
In fact, the more quality it is, the lesser the folks can use it, because it eats a lot of data, right? If it's high definition in the highest form of, then very few people can look at it, because data is expensive. And so probably lower the quality to the acceptable level that you were talking about, enough. But what is enough has to be proven in a real situation.
And in fact, that's kind of where in closing, maybe I was even thinking we were leaving with this question, and it goes to your randomized control study or whatever it is, which is What are enough pixels to get the learning outcomes and the interaction outcomes that you want? What are enough bits per second to get the learning outcomes you want? What is the right content? And is it about the studio quality, or is it about the superstar prof, or is it about peer-to-peer learning and all of, you can throw studios and professors out the window? I think for sure, I'm seeing a lot of nods, that at least from my perspective, a lot of these are still unanswered questions. And us as, I think, engaged practitioners and academics in this space want to be at the forefront of getting past the hype and finding what is enough. So let me just invite us all to thank our excellent panelists.